G'day, Steve Morgan here on a Friday. A Friday we are driving from dawn till dusk. We're just south of Sydney at the moment, got off the Spirit of Tasmania about an hour before the sun came up this morning. Did a few errands. I've got a secret guitar and a spare tyre in the back there because I could fit them in. And it's Tackle Fridays again. So obviously the last few weeks have been all about Tassie. We're still a day's drive from home, but I've been thinking about what I learnt the most in Tassie this year. And apart from the tournament side, which was to trust your instincts when you're fishing, and no run means no fun. You can see those in my highlights on the YouTube channel. There are the highlights from each day. That tournament was all about fishing the current while it was there at the run that part of the tide, and then when the current died you got to leave because those fish would not start biting again until maybe 2 or 3 hours later until the tide ran. But after we finished at the Derwent, spent a few days down at a place called Dover doing a couple of things. One was looking for a venue for the Huon River round down there, and we found a great venue at the Commandy Hotel. The guy that owns the pub owns the marina. The ramp's small but okay, plenty of parking. I think we're going to have an epic Tassie tour next year. Probably have the venues of the Derwent and the Huon River. So we've done all that homework there because you can do it easily when you're there, and it's harder to do when you're 20-something hours drive away. Anyway, while we're at Dover, I did a lot of fishing of big Cranka Crabs. I've always been a fan of the smaller Cranka Crabs. Back in one of my year-ending videos, I think the one in 2018, I did the stats. I worked out that I caught 40% of all the fish I caught in tournaments all year that went to the weigh station were on Cranka Crabs, and it hasn't been as high since. But even on years when you think you catch everything on Cranka Crabs, it's not even 50%. But I fell in love with the big Cranka Crabs down in Tassie as a big fish catching tool this time. On the highlights videos, I'll put some of the clips on here. I didn't actually land too much on big Cranka Crabs at the end of the first day at the Derwent because I had some rubbish leader, I think, on my BFS outfit, and I lost 3 in a row. But all of those were decent sized fish, I think. And when I got down to Dover, I had a session where I walked the beach one afternoon and didn't catch heaps of fish, but they were all pretty big on the heavy Cranka Crab, and it was only fishing it in maybe 18 inches of water over a rippled bottom, bouncing that crab over the little ripples in the bottom so you could feel when it didn't have weed on it, and just having big bream come and attack it. Now, what was really interesting was the first fish that came up to me on that beach was about a kilo fish. There was actually 2 of them, and I dragged the crab all the way to my feet, and I was stirring up some sand with my feet, and the fish came right in and was only at my rod tip basically, and was looking at the crab, and I was watching it actually how it attacks the crab. And you don't often get to see how fish eat a Cranka Crab in real life because they're normally eating it off the bottom or at the end of a long cast. So this was right at the end of my rod tip, and I was sitting there just shaking it, and the claws are jumping up and down, and that bream would swim on one side and the other side and have a look at it, and it would pluck at the claws. And I was trying to sort of surreptitiously pull my phone out and film it, but I couldn't get it done before it actually got hooked on one of the claws and took off, and then fell off because didn't set the hook. But I did learn that I'm probably fishing my Cranka Crabs a little bit fast. After that, I'd throw out, let it sink, drag it a bit, slow down, shake it a little bit, take up the slack, drag it a little bit, slow down, shake it a little bit. And I think as I slowed it down, I caught more fish. Now, the day ended catching a really big, like a low 40 centimetres fork fish. And I've got some cutaway of that here. That was a pretty popular video, or at least by itself this week. And then later on that, I think it was the next day in Dover, I went to what we call the Jetty of Death, and I lost a couple of Cranka Crabs in a couple of casts. Not bad leader this time because I'd caught a dozen wrasse on one big Cranka Crab, and those things are big, they pull hard, and they stretch your limit out. So I had great 10-pound leader on, but the oysters around the pylon sort of got me. But I was thinking back about how many fish did I catch on that big Cranka Crab that weren't big fish, and it was none. You don't get On the small crab, on the mussel, I'd be getting some small fish. Small fish down there, it's like 600-800 grams, but everything on the big crab was sort of a kilo and more. So I'm really thinking that I underuse that big crab as a tournament tool. Now, the couple of other things about big crabs that I really like is the fact that they've got larger claws, bigger hooks than the small Cranka crab. A couple of years ago when Jamie McEwen won the Lake Macquarie tournament on the bridge on tarwine and big bream, he would actually use the claws from the big Cranka crab on the little one because you can lean on them harder and keep them out of structure, and you can definitely do that with the big Cranka crab. But the other thing a big Cranka crab does that I really like is it skips really well. So as long as your water's reasonably flat, you can actually skip that crab up under docks. Now I was doing that a little bit at Gippsland Lakes as well, using that big crab to skip up under the docks when I wanted to get it right up and under there. The little crab doesn't skip so much. The big Cranka crab does it. So I talked to Steersy about that this morning. So Steersy, what's your big stock of big Cranka crabs like? Because normally I think he struggles to sell the same quantities of big Cranka crabs as little ones. And he said, oh, Morgan, I'm actually all out of those big Cranka crabs at the moment. But there are more coming. Within a month or two, he'll have more stocks of all of those big Cranka crabs. So for me, one of the gun lures in Tassie was the olive and the spotted colour Cranka crabs in the big size. Not the giant size of the single hooks, just that next size up. I think they're a 65 mil, the big size. If I'm wrong, tell me down in the comments, because for me, it's just the medium-sized Cranka crab. I went down with a cardboard box full of them, and I came back with about 3. One of them's hanging on the carpet on the edge of my boat there. Now, what tackle do I fish that on? BFS, a fair bit, especially if it's a heavy leader and I'm throwing it into heavy structure. But I actually enjoyed fishing on the beach on my long aqua rod. It's the Daiwa in-feed, 7'4". I don't know the exact numbers on it, but it's the one that I use as my aqua rod. Again, with a heavy 10-pound leader on, you can make such a long cast with that big crab, and just on braid and leader, you can actually feel them rattling that crab a long way out, even though there might be a lot of weed and a lot of play in the system. So that's it from me, Cranka crabs. I'll give you a few more Cranka crab tips though, that will make you a better Cranka crab fisherman. First is, if you're going to go in a tournament, use a brand new one straight out of the box. You need to have those legs on each side of the crab need to be perfect for it to sink symmetrically. If you've left it in your tackle box and half of the legs are all curled up, it's going to spin on the way down and you will get virtually no bites on that Cranka crab. The good news is if you have mistreated your Cranka crab and haven't stored it properly, you can get some boiling water, dip the legs in until they get soft, and then put it down on a table or on a hard surface. Let those legs cool down and they will sort of reset themselves so that you can get it sinking straight again. Or if you've got those legs plucked off, you can buy spares. You can buy spare Cranka crab legs. You can tear the old ones out, push the new ones in, dab a super glue, and they're fine. The other thing that you can do to renovate your Cranka crabs is you can actually buy the new claws as well. And Steersy was great. He gave me sort of a box of the left and the right hand claws early on in the piece, and I'm still using those today. You do, when you're catching 10 giant wrasse in a row, they chew the foam bits off the claws, and of course the foam makes those claws float up in the water. And as I was watching those brimming close, that's what they're focused on. They're focused on those moving claws and trying to pluck those. And that's of course why you catch a lot of brim and Cranka crabs that have one hook in each side of their mouths. It's a pretty cool thing in a tournament when you hook a Cranka crabfish in heavy structure and all it's doing is shaking its head to try and get this Cranka crab out of its mouth, because they don't fight at all. They normally just swim straight out of the structure, or you can pull them straight out of the structure. Many times your big fish you're hooking Cranka crabs are all tangled up on that lure, and they only start fighting when they get to the boat and work out that there's a net coming at them. So that's another advantage of fishing those in the tournament. Steersy, you made a fantastic product. It only took me about 5 or 6 years to fall in love with that big Cranka crab, and of course when I fall in love with it, you're out of stock. So if you're a retailer, get your orders in. The new stocks are only a month or two away. He's taking pre-orders on them. If you can find some in your old tackle shop, I know I'm going to be scouring some shops on the way back up the coast, because maybe in the Australian Open and the Hawkesbury this year, that big Cranka crab is going to be a lure that plays for me. So there you go, Tackle Fridays. Not Cranka Crab 101, Cranka Crab 201, advanced Cranka Crab.